The knife came down fast, and Luke Mercer caught the wrist behind it with both hands. The man on the other end of that knife was named Crest Hollow, and he was 3 times the width of Luke's shoulders, which made the next 2 seconds very uncomfortable. Luke had the wrist. Crest Hollow had the other arm free, and he used it to slam Luke sideways into the market stall counter hard enough to scatter dried figs across the packed earth floor of the Northern Pass Monastery Market. Pilgrims and merchants scrambled back. A woman screamed. Somewhere behind the commotion, a donkey began braying as if it had an opinion. Luke held on. He was a bounty hunter by trade, not a brawler, and the distinction mattered because brawlers hit until something gave way, while bounty hunters held on until the other man got tired. Luke was very good at holding on. He had the writ for Crest Hollow in his breast pocket, forgery of merchant ledgers, 3 counts, issued out of the monastery council itself, and he intended to collect the man's weight in silver, which was going to be a satisfying sum given that Crest Hollow was enormous. What Luke had not intended was to get his ribs introduced to a market counter for the 3rd time this morning. He planted his boot against the counter's base, leveraged off it, and drove Crest Hollow back into the crowd of panicked onlookers. Someone's elbow caught Luke in the ear. He heard Crest Hollow snarl. He felt the knife wrist torque in his grip, the blade angling now toward his stomach instead of his throat, and Luke had the very clear, very calm thought that this was about to go badly unless something changed. Something changed. A hand like a green iron band came over Crest Hollow's knife wrist from the other direction, and the bone in that wrist made a sound like green wood snapping, and Crest Hollow screamed, and the knife hit the floor between 3 pairs of boots. Luke looked up. She was standing a full head above Crest Hollow and half again as broad through the shoulder, wearing a fitted set of dark crimson warrior's leathers, a close-laced bodice over layered riding breeches, with a short-skirted overskirt buckled at the left hip to leave her sword hand free, everything cut tight to a figure that was powerful and curved and built for long miles of mountain country. Her hair was black as crow feathers, worn in a single heavy braid that fell over one shoulder. Her tusks were small and ivory pale, and her eyes were the deep amber of fire-lit resin, and she was looking at Crest Hollow the way a hawk looks at something very small and very stupid. "This man belongs to you?" she asked. Her voice was low, accented like gravel pulled through still water. Luke realized she was talking to him. "He's a warrant I'm collecting," Luke said. She looked at Crest Hollow, who was clutching his wrist and making very small sounds. She looked back at Luke. Something in her expression shifted, not quite amusement, but its cousin. "Then collect him," she said, and let go of the wrist. She was gone back into the market crowd before Luke had Crest Hollow's hands bound behind him, and it took Luke a full 20 minutes after delivering the man to the monastery's constable office and collecting his silver before he understood why the encounter had landed in his chest the way it had. He had seen her before. He had seen Dura Darkwolf 3 years ago in this same market, when she rode through the Northern Pass at the head of a war band of 30 that moved like smoke and hit like stone. She had not been on the monastery council's wanted board because no constable with good sense issued warrants on Dura Darkwolf. You did not collect Dura Darkwolf. She was the feared raider of the Northern Pass, and she collected you if you were foolish enough to stand across from her. She was 27 years old, and she had held the high passes since she was 20, and the tribute caravans paid her willingly, because the alternative was being stripped bare and sent back barefoot in the snow. 3 years ago, Luke had been running a warrant on one of her men, not her. He had not been that foolish, and she had ridden past him in the street, and their eyes had met for exactly 3 seconds, and something had passed between them that Luke had been carrying in the back of his chest ever since. He found her at a stall near the Eastern Arcade, haggling over a bolt of dark green wool with the focus of a woman who was not accustomed to anyone saying the word no to her, and losing spectacularly because the merchant clearly had a death wish. 2 silvers, she said. 3, the merchant said. 2 silvers and your teeth stay in your mouth. 2.5 and you get the bolt and I get to keep my dignity. She slapped 2 silvers and a copper on the counter, took the bolt, and turned directly into Luke, who had gotten closer than he meant to. She looked down at him. She had 4 inches on him, and recognition moved through those amber eyes like a flame through oil. "The bounty hunter," she said. "Luke Mercer," he said. "You saved my life back there. I owe you a drink." "I saved your warrant," she said. "I do not need your drink." "What do you need, then?" It was a bold question, and he knew it, and she knew it, and she looked at him for a long moment with that hawk's calculation, and then she said something he had not expected. "I need someone who can read." The silence between them stretched. "I can read," Luke said. She studied him. He did not look away. He had learned a long time ago that looking away first cost you ground you never got back. "Come," she said. She led him through the eastern arcade and up the stone-flagged steps that led to the monastery's secondary market level, the one that overlooked the pass road and the brutal drop into the valley below. The wind up here smelled of pine and cold iron and snow that was 4 weeks off but coming. She sat on the low wall with the valley spread behind her as if the drop were nothing, the bolt of wool across her knees, and she pulled from inside her fitted bodice a folded piece of paper. She held it out. He took it, unfolded it carefully. It was a travel contract, a supply writ, he realized, from the monastery council itself. A commission to escort and guarantee safe passage of a supply train through the Thornback Pass, the secondary route that wound north, and then east past country that had been carved out by 3 different warlords in the past decade, and was currently held by nobody, which meant it was held by everybody at once. The commission was for the movement of grain, salted meat, and iron tools to a mining settlement called Ashgate that had been cut off since the spring floods took out the main bridge on the primary road. 300 people at Ashgate would not survive the winter without those supplies. At the bottom of the contract, 2 names were listed as co-commissioners. The first was Dura Darkwolf. The second line was blank. He looked up at her. "They want me to escort this," she said. "The council, they say I know the northern routes better than anyone living. I agreed because they agreed to clear 3 outstanding warrants my band has accumulated." She paused. "I did not tell them I cannot read the contract I signed." "You signed it without reading it." "I recognized my name at the top," she said flatly. "I know my own name." He pressed his lips together and did not smile, because she would have thrown him off the wall for smiling. "They need a second signatory," he said. "Someone the council trusts. Someone who has done work for them before," she said. "You have 6 closed warrants with the monastery council. You are known to them, and you need coin for the winter. I have watched you count your silver twice since you left the constable's office." He had not noticed her watching him. He made a note to remember that she noticed everything. "Why me specifically?" he asked. She met his eyes without blinking. "Because 3 years ago you looked at me like I was a person," she said, "and most people in this market do not." The bluntness of it hit him somewhere between his ribs. He looked down at the contract, then back at her. "I would need to know what the route looks like," he said, "and I would need to know what your band is willing to do." "My band can hold any stretch of that road against anything Thornback country throws at us," she said. "We have done it before." "And the council's silver, split even," she said. "You and I, even," he repeated. "I am giving you half of what I negotiated," she said. "Do not make me regret it." He folded the contract. He looked out at the valley below them, at the ribbon of road that wound north until it bent behind the mountain and disappeared into country that had swallowed better men than him. He thought about the 300 people in Ashgate who were not going to make it to spring without this supply train. He thought about the 3 seconds 3 years ago and the thing he had been carrying since. "Teach me the route tonight," he said, "and I will sign in the morning." Something shifted in her face. Not soft, nothing about Dura Darkwolf was soft but warmer, like the fire had taken hold of the wood. "Come to the northern fire," she said, "after the evening bell." He was there before the bell finished ringing. Her warband's camp was set on the rocky flat above the monastery's northern gate. 8 tents, in a precise arrangement that told anyone who knew how to look that these people had been running military camps for years. There were 11 of them total, and they watched Luke cross the firelight with eyes that were not friendly but were not, yet, hostile. An enormous orc with a scar that bisected his left eyebrow gave Luke a look that communicated a great many things in very efficient silence. Dura was sitting on a boulder near the largest fire with a piece of charcoal and a flat stone, drawing lines that Luke quickly realized were a map. She did not look up when he sat down beside her. "Here is Thornback Pass," she said, pointing. "Here is the place where the road narrows to 2 wagon widths. Here is where Brant Hollowell's men held a toll gate last season. Is Hollowell still operating?" "Hollowell is dead," she said. "His second, a man named Vale, took over. Vale is smarter and more dangerous and likes to wait in the second canyon rather than the first." "How many?" 30 last time I moved through, but he recruits fast." Luke leaned forward, studying the map. Their shoulders touched. Neither of them moved away. "If we take the high road off the main track here," he said, tracing a finger across the stone, "we can bypass the second canyon entirely. It adds half a day." She looked at where his finger was. "The high road is exposed. Archers. Not if we move before dawn through the exposed stretch." A pause. She studied the map. He studied her profile in the firelight, the strong line of her jaw, the way the firelight caught the ivory of her tusks, the particular stillness she had when she was thinking hard. "Acceptable," she said. "When does the supply train leave?" 4 days. The council is loading wagons now." "How many wagons?" 6, 40 mules, a driver team of 8. 30 people defending 6 wagons through Thornback country," he said. "I have run worse odds." "So have I," she said. They worked through the map until the fire burned low and the rest of her band had rolled into their tents. The enormous scarred orc, she called him Tarak, and he appeared to be something between a lieutenant and a personal guard, had not gone to his tent and was sitting 20 feet away with his back turned, which was his version of giving them privacy. When they had gone over the route 3 times and Luke had committed it to memory in the way he had trained himself to do on long chases, he sat back and looked at the charcoal map on the flat stone. "You want to learn to read," he said. It was not a question. She was quiet for long enough that he thought she was going to refuse to address it. "The contract today," she said finally. "This is not the first time. 3 years running this pass, and every toll agreement, every treaty negotiation, every supply contract the council sends, I have relied on others to read them to me. My second reads. Tarak reads a little, but if they are not with me," she stopped. "You are raiding supply trains because you cannot verify what's in the tribute agreements," he said quietly. Her jaw tightened. "I raid supply trains because the monastery council spent 10 years stripping every orc clan out of the valley below, and when we had nothing left we took back what we needed. Do not make it smaller than it is. A beat. But yes, I have signed things I should not have signed. I have missed things I should have caught." "How old were you when you took the pass?" 20. "And before you ask, no, there was no schoolmaster in the war camp where I grew up. There was a sword and a bow and a way to split firewood that did not break your back." "I had a schoolmaster," he said. "He smelled of pipe smoke and he hit my knuckles with a ruler every time I got a letter wrong." He looked at the stone. "I was a terrible student for the first year." She looked at him. And then I decided I wanted to read the warrants myself instead of having the constable explain them to me. And then I could." A beat of silence. "Show me something," she said. "Now, one thing." He picked up the charcoal. On a clean section of the stone he wrote carefully, "Dura." "Your name," he said. She stared at it. He watched her eyes move over the letters, not with incomprehension, but with the focused intensity of someone who has looked at written words before and knows what they are supposed to do, just hasn't been shown the key. "I have seen it written," she said. "Say the sounds," he said. "D-da, da, you the way you say the U in run." "Run," she said, and then, "Dura, a-ah, Dura-ah." She paused. "Dura." "That's it," he said. She was quiet. Then she reached over and took the charcoal from his fingers, and on the stone beneath his letters she drew her own, larger and heavier and slightly crooked but recognizable. "Dura." She set the charcoal down. She looked at her own name written by her own hand, and something moved across her face that Luke thought was probably the closest thing to vulnerable he had ever seen on her. "We start properly on the journey," she said. "You will have time while the wagons move." "Every day," he said. "A lesson every day." She looked at him, and in the firelight her eyes were very warm. "Every day," she agreed. The signing at the monastery council chamber the next morning was a tense affair. Dura arrived in her crimson leathers with Tarak at her shoulder, and 3 other members of her band ranged outside the door, and the 4 council members at the long stone table did not bother hiding their discomfort. Luke sat across from them and signed his name in the second column with the council registrar watching, and when the registrar slid the contract toward Dura, she took the quill and wrote her name without hesitation in the clean, slightly crooked letters she had practiced on the stone the night before. The registrar looked at the signature, then at Dura. She said nothing and gave him nothing to work with. Luke blotted his copy of the contract and tucked it into his breast pocket. Outside the chamber, in the monastery's main courtyard where the morning light hit the old stone yellow and clean, Dura looked at him sideways. "Did I do it correctly?" she said, very quietly so only he could hear. "Perfectly," he said. She looked straight ahead and her chin lifted slightly, and he thought that if he were a smarter man he would already know he was in serious trouble. The supply wagons left on the 4th morning before sunrise, exactly as planned. 6 heavy wagons loaded with winter grain, salt-cured meat in sealed barrels, and iron tools wrapped in oilskin, each pulled by a team of 6 mules. The driver team were hard-faced men and women from the mountain settlements who knew the pass roads and kept their eyes forward and their mouths shut, which Luke respected enormously. Dura's band rode in a spread formation, 4 ahead, 4 rearguard, Tarak on the right flank, Dura herself ranging between front and rear in a pattern that covered every gap. Luke rode the left flank alone. He had done this long enough to move with a caravan without being in anyone's way. They cleared the monastery's lower gate in the gray pre-dawn, and the road opened ahead of them into the mountain corridor that was the northern pass proper. The air was cold and tasted of stone and the first traces of coming snow. The wagon wheels ground on the road surface, and the mules breathed white clouds, and somewhere far above an eagle called once and went silent. Dura fell in beside him around the 2nd mile. She handed him a strip of dried meat without comment, and he took it without comment, and they rode in comfortable silence for a while, which he noticed because comfortable silence with someone was rarer than most people thought. "First lesson," she said eventually. He pulled a small notebook from his coat, thin oilskin cover, pages of rough paper, a stub of charcoal in the spine. He had carried it since he started taking warrants and used it for tracking names and routes and bounty details. "We will start with the alphabet," he said. 26 letters, you know 5 of them already. 5, D-U-R-A, and the second A, that's 5. She considered this as if taking inventory. "Show me 10 more today." "That is ambitious for a moving horse." "I am ambitious," she said simply. He balanced the notebook on his knee and wrote the first 10 letters of the alphabet clearly, his handwriting careful, because he wanted her to be able to use these later. He went through them one by one, the sound of each, the way it was formed, noting which ones she already recognized from seeing her name posted on toll agreements. She had a remarkable memory. By the time they reached the first rest stop, a wide flat pull-off cut into the mountain face where the mules could water at a spring-fed trough, she could recite the first 10 letters forward and nearly backward. "You are a very fast learner," he said. "I have been learning hard things since I was 8, she said. "Letters are not harder than fighting on ice." "Is that true?" She thought about it seriously. "The ice has better consequences for failure," she said. He laughed, and she looked at him with that amber gaze, and then she looked away, but the corner of her mouth had moved. Tarak, watering his horse 3 feet away, was looking at the sky with the focused attention of a man who had decided he was not noticing anything. The first trouble hit at the second canyon. Luke had expected Vale's men to be in the second canyon, and he was right, which was less satisfying than he would have liked because being right was not the same as being safe. They came off the canyon walls on the ropes they had obviously pre-rigged, 5 men to the left, 3 to the right, and a voice bellowing from the canyon floor ahead where the road choked down to a single wagon's width. "Stop the train." The voice belonged to a big man on a gray horse who wore a steel-pinned leather coat that had been expensive once. "Toll of passage. Council rate applies, 2 silvers per axle or you turn back." Luke counted heads. 11 visible, but the canyon walls had overhangs. Dura had already put her horse between the lead wagon and the canyon mouth. She sat very still, and the stillness was more alarming than any movement would have been. "There is no toll here," she said. Her voice carried the canyon perfectly. "The northern pass is under monastery commission. Vale knows this because I told him personally last spring." "Vale has reconsidered his position," the man in the steel-pinned coat said. "Then Vale should come say so himself," she said, "instead of sending his second." A pause. The man on the gray horse, the second, Luke now understood, recalculated something behind his eyes. Dura turned her head precisely 2 inches and said, at a volume meant only for Luke, "The overhang to the left, 3 archers." Luke had already seen one. He filed the other 2 and put his hand on the crossbow on his saddle without drawing it. "We pass through," Dura said to the canyon at full volume. "Anyone who stops a monastery supply train answers to the council and to me. I am Dura Darkwolf. You know who I am. Tell your men on the ropes to climb back up and go home." The silence lasted 7 seconds. Luke counted. Then one of the rope men climbed back up his line. Then a second. The man on the gray horse held for 3 more seconds, then pulled his horse aside. They rolled through. Luke let out a breath he had been holding since the ropes dropped. When he pulled alongside Dura on the far side of the canyon, he said, very quietly, "I thought that was going to go differently." "It almost did," she said. The second archer on the left overhang had his crossbow half raised. "If I had moved my hand toward my sword it would have fired." "How did you know he wouldn't fire anyway?" "Because Vale's men are afraid of me," she said, "and fear is useful. A beat. Also because I was prepared to move very fast if it did not work." He looked at her. She was looking at the road ahead, back in the easy scan she used when moving through terrain, and he thought that she had just told him, in her sideways way, that she had been ready to put herself between his crossbow and the wagon train, and she had said it as if it were simply logistics. He did not say anything, but he filed it. The second day of travel was quieter, and they settled into a rhythm hymn on the left flank in the mornings, her ranging, and then after the midday rest they rode together and he taught her letters. She filled an entire page of his notebook on the second day, the letters getting less crooked as the miles passed, and she made him read aloud the words on every road marker and waystone they passed, repeating the words to herself in a low voice until the sounds matched the shapes. She was building something in her head, he could see it, a framework, a system, and she was filling in the gaps with a focused intensity that was absolutely characteristic of her. She did not do anything halfway. He suspected she never had. On the second night they camped on a wide shelf above a river gorge, and the campfire sent orange light across the stone, and the sky was huge and cold and full of stars. The drivers kept to their own fire. Dura's band kept to theirs. Luke had positioned himself, as had become habit, at the edge of Dura's fire, which the band had stopped side-eyeing after the first day, though Tarek still tracked him with a lateral awareness that was not hostile but was absolutely constant. Dura sat beside him with the notebook open on her knee and was copying the words he had shown her from the monastery supply contract. She had asked him to bring it out and read it to her in full, and then she had asked him to read the section about payment a second time and then a third time, and on the third read-through she had pointed at a line and said, "That word, what does it say?" "Discretionary," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means the council can choose whether to pay the bonus provisions based on their judgment of how well the job was done." She went very still. Then, "They did not explain it that way." "No, they would not." She was quiet for a long time, looking at the contract. "What else have I signed that I did not understand?" she said, not loudly, not angrily. The question had a weight to it that came from long accumulation. "That's why you're learning to read," he said. She looked at him. There was something in her expression then that was not softness exactly, but was its architecture, the bones of it, the shape before the surface formed. "When I was 15, she said, "the clan chief signed a treaty with the valley magistrate. I was there. I watched. I thought it was strength, two leaders signing a paper together." She looked at the fire. "3 years later we understood what the treaty said. What we had actually agreed to give away. By then the valley was fenced and the clan had nothing to graze and no water rights, and the magistrate had it all in writing." She paused. The chief could not read either. Luke held the silence for a moment, the way you hold a thing that needs to be held. "No one wins a war they don't know they're in," he said. "No," she said. She looked down at the notebook. "Read me the next section." He read to her for an hour while the fire burned and the gorge murmured far below and the stars wheeled overhead. And somewhere in the middle of a clause about indemnity for mule losses, she fell asleep sitting up against the boulder at her back, the notebook still open on her knee, and he caught it before it fell and did not move for a long time in the quiet. He pulled his coat off and put it over her shoulders. Tarak, 6 feet away in the dark, saw him do it and looked away. Luke sat with his back to the boulder and watched the fire die. The third day brought 2 things: the high road bypass and Corvin Wrath. The high road was a goat track that had been widened by the mining settlement's supply runs, and then narrowed again by 2 winters of rockslide and neglect. Luke had been right that it was exposed. For 2 hours before dawn, they moved through a stretch of bare mountain face with no cover on either side, and the valley floor 200 feet below. But the timing held, and the one crossbow position that could have commanded that stretch was empty. Corvin Wrath appeared at the midday rest stop. He came up the road from the direction they had come, which meant he had started behind them and ridden hard to catch up, which meant he knew they were here. He was a human man, perhaps 5 years older than Luke, with a lean face and an easy smile and 2 long-bladed hunting knives on his belt, and the kind of clothes that cost real money but were worn to look casual. He rode a good horse well. He introduced himself to the lead driver as an independent contractor hired by the monastery council to supplement the escort. Luke found the addition of this information extremely interesting, because the contract in his breast pocket listed 2 co-commissioners and no supplemental contractors. He found Dura on the right flank and said, "The man who just joined the train, do you know him?" "I know of him," she said. Her voice was neutral in the particular way that meant she was choosing each word. "Corvin Wrath runs supply escorts out of the lower valley. He and I have overlapping territory, a beat. He has tried to negotiate arrangements with me before." "What kind of arrangements?" "The kind that would make his supply routes safer by giving him access to my pass routes." Another beat. And that was not all he was negotiating. Luke looked at Corvin Wrath, who was at that moment dismounting with practiced ease and looking at Dura across the rest stop with an expression that was openly appreciative and not trying to conceal it. "Does he know about the supply commission?" Luke asked. "No one outside the council and us should know," she said. "Someone told him." "Yes," she said, "someone did." Luke rode across the rest stop to where Corvin Wrath was watering his horse. "Luke Mercer," he said, and let the name sit there because most people who moved in bounty hunting circles knew it. "I know who you are," Wrath said pleasantly. "You have a good reputation, solid work. You have a hiring contract from the council. I can check it against the commission writ." Wrath smiled. The smile was charming. Luke disliked it immediately. "Verbal agreement," Wrath said. "The registrar will confirm it when we return." "A verbal agreement for a mountain supply run," Luke said. "The council wanted additional coverage. Thornback country is no joke." Wrath looked across the stop toward Dura. "Though I can see they've got very capable coverage already." "They do," Luke said. "So capable that supplemental coverage seems redundant." Wrath looked at him then, and the charm was still there, but something more honest was behind it. "You and Darkwolf have some history, Mercer." "We have a signed contract," Luke said. "Sure," Wrath said pleasantly. Luke went back to his flank position and spent the next 2 miles thinking about Corvin Wrath and what he actually wanted. And the more he thought about it, the more the picture arranged itself clearly and unpleasantly. Wrath had not ridden 3 days of hard mountain road to collect a contractor's fee from a verbal agreement that probably did not exist. He had come because he knew Dura Darkwolf was running this route, and he had come to be useful enough in some crisis that she would consider his negotiation differently on the other side. The crisis came that same afternoon on the Fourth Canyon. The Fourth Canyon was not on Dura's threat assessment. It was not a known toll point. But Vale's second, the man on the gray horse who had backed down from Dura's challenge in the second canyon 2 days ago, had clearly spent the intervening time sending a rider the long way around to set up ahead of them. There were 20 men in the Fourth Canyon, not 11, and they did not present themselves on ropes from the canyon walls. They blocked the road with a burning wagon. The supply train stopped hard. The mules protested. Luke had his crossbow off the saddle in the 3 seconds it took to understand the situation, and Dura was already turning her horse back toward the train with her sword in her hand, calling positioning to her band in the clipped Orc clan shorthand that her people moved on instinctively. From the canyon walls, rocks began to fall. Not arrows, rocks which were cheaper and slower but could break a mule's leg or a driver's skull. This was where Corvin Wrath made his move. Not at the rocks, not at the burning wagon, he rode hard for Dura. Luke saw it from the left flank and understood it in a flash that was partly tactical and partly something else, something hotter and less clinical. Wrath was positioning himself to be the one who reached Dura first, to be the one who put his body between her and the rocks falling from the canyon wall, to do in this crisis what he had ridden 3 days to engineer the opportunity to do. Luke kicked his horse to a gallop. Wrath reached Dura's left side first. His horse pressed close to hers, shielding her from the left wall rock fall, and he was saying something to her that Luke couldn't hear across the noise and distance, something that came with that easy smile, and Dura was not smiling back, but she was not moving away, because the rocks were real and cover was cover. Then a rock the size of 2 fists came off the right wall, and it was heading for the back of Dura's head, and Wrath was on the wrong side to do anything about it. Luke was not on the wrong side. He came off his horse at a dead gallop into a running jump that was one of the worst decisions he had made in a year that had featured several, hit Dura across the shoulders with his forearm, and took the rock across his left shoulder blade instead of it taking her skull. The impact knocked the breath out of him, and he went down in the road dirt with white light across his vision. He heard Dura's voice, sharp and close. "Luke." He got his hands under him and pushed up. His left arm was numb from shoulder to elbow, but it was moving so nothing was broken. He got to one knee. Dura was off her horse, crouched in front of him, one hand on his shoulder, her amber eyes very close and very intense. "I am fine," he said. "You are not fine," she said. "Nothing is broken," he said. "Check the wall, are they still dropping rocks?" She looked up. "Tarek has the right wall," she said. "He is convincing them to stop." Tarek's method of convincing apparently involved climbing, because Luke could see the man's enormous silhouette ascending the canyon wall with the focused determination of someone who had been waiting for an excuse. The rock fall stopped. Corvin Wrath was beside them now, horse pulled up, looking at Luke with an expression that was harder to read than his easy smile. "Good instincts," Wrath said. "Standard escort work," Luke said. He stood up. His shoulder was going to be spectacular colors by morning. Dura kept her hand on his arm for a moment longer than necessary and then removed it, and the absence of her hand was a very specific sensation. Tarek and 2 others dealt with the burning wagon by the simple method of pushing it off the road and into the canyon gorge, and the road cleared, and the men below Vale's people, or what was left of their nerve, melted back into the canyon without pressing their advantage. Luke suspected Tarek's ascent had suggested things to them about what pressing the advantage might cost. That evening's camp was the last before Ashgate. The settlement's fire could be seen from the high camp, a cluster of warm lights in the deep valley that represented 300 people who did not yet know their winter had been secured. Corvin Wrath built his campfire between the supply train's fire and Dura's band's fire, in the narrow strip of ground that was adjacent to both, and the placement was not accidental. Luke's shoulder hurt badly enough that moving his left arm required a conscious choice each time, and he was sitting on a boulder working through the decision tree of whether he needed to do anything about Wrath when Dura materialized beside him and sat down without preamble, close enough that their arms were nearly touching. She had, he noticed, positioned herself on his right side so her body was between him and Wrath's fire. She opened the notebook. "Lesson," she said. "My shoulder is not broken," he confirmed, since she had not asked but was clearly waiting for the information. "I know," she said. "I checked while you were unconscious." "I was not unconscious." "You were briefly unconscious," she said with no particular inflection. She opened the notebook to the page she had last filled. The word on this line. "What does it say?" He looked. "Provisions," he said. "Provisions." She looked at the letters. "The P and the R together," she said. "Pra," and then the O, prova. She was sounding through it the way she moved through terrain, not rushing, checking each step. "Keep going," he said. Prova. She paused at the SION combination. He talked her through it. Her brow furrowed in concentration, and the firelight made everything warm and close, and the shoulder throbbed, and the stars were overhead, and Corvin Wrath was 20 feet away pretending to read a very interesting piece of bark, and Luke thought he had probably never in his life been as completely in one place as he was at this moment. "Provisions," she said, clearly. "Yes," he said. She wrote it below the printed word in her increasingly confident, slightly angular script. "Luke," she said, not looking up. "Yes. The man who came to you in the past last season," she said. "Crest Hollow." He blinked at the subject change. "He was a forger. I had a warrant for him. You have a warrant for many people. It is how I pay for things." "Have you always done this work?" He was quiet for a moment. "My father was a merchant on the Lower Valley Road," he said. "He died when I was 19, debt mostly, and a winter that was particularly interested in finishing the job the debt started. I owed his creditors more than I had. I found a man who owed them more than I did, collected the warrant, and discovered I was good at finding people who did not want to be found." He paused. "It is solitary work." She looked at him then. "Yes," she said. Something in the word, the way she said it, even and unadorned, told him she understood what he meant. Not just the logistics of it, but the weight of it, the particular solitude of moving through the world always a little apart from it. "Your band," he said. "How long have they been with you?" "Tarek, since the beginning," she said. 7 years. The others joined in the second and third years. They are," she paused, finding the word. "Family," she said. "The word does not fully translate, but it is close enough." "Does it bother them," he said, "that you are spending the lessons with me?" She looked at him steadily. "They are not sure about you yet," she said, "but they trust my judgment. And your judgment of me." She was quiet for long enough that he thought she was going to redirect, and then she said, "You threw yourself between a rock and my skull when it cost you nothing to let Wrath do it instead." "Wrath was on the wrong side," Luke said. "Wrath was on the wrong side because you got there first," she said. "And we both know that." He held her gaze. "My judgment of you," she said carefully, "is that you are the first person in a very long time who has not wanted something from me that I was not already willing to give." "I am teaching you to read," he said. "You are teaching me to read," she confirmed, "because I asked, not because you want the pass route or the council's ear or anything that I have, just because I asked." "You saved my warrant," he said. "It seemed fair." "Bounty hunters do not risk cracked skulls for fairness," she said. He looked at the fire. He could feel her eyes on the side of his face, and he did not look up, not yet, because he wanted to hold the moment exactly as it was for one more breath. "No," he said, "they do not." When he looked up, she was very close, and her eyes were the color of fire in resin, and she did not look away. She was the one who closed the remaining distance, because she was Dura Darkwolf, and she did not wait for things to come to her. It was not a tentative thing. She was not tentative about anything, and the kiss had the same quality as her voice, that gravel and still water gravity, and he kissed her back with his good arm and his whole sorry heart, and it lasted longer than either of them probably planned. When they separated, she looked at him with an expression that was not self-conscious but was aware, assessing what had happened and what it meant, and then she nodded once to herself, the way she nodded after solving a tactical problem. "The next word," she said, looking down at the notebook. "Right," he said, and his voice was slightly less steady than usual. "The next word." Corvin Rath was looking at the sky with tremendous interest. They reached Ashgate the following morning in a cold white light that was the first serious push of autumn making its intentions clear. The settlement's gates were open before the lead wagon got within 100 yards, and people came out to meet them, miners and their families, hard-faced and lean from months of short rations. And when they saw the supply wagons, the sound that went through the crowd was not cheering exactly, but something more necessary than cheering, something that came from a deeper place. Luke helped offload grain barrels, and Dura directed the placement of the iron tools with precise efficiency, and the drivers accepted cups of hot broth from the settlement's cook fire, and stood around it looking relieved in the specific way of people who have done dangerous work and come through it intact. The settlement's headwoman, a compact woman named Sella Bryn with gray streaks in her black hair and direct eyes, found Luke near the fourth wagon. "You made it through Thornback country in 4 days," she said. That is genuinely remarkable." "We had good route knowledge," Luke said. She looked across to where Dura was signing the delivery receipt for the headwoman's clerk, writing her name in clear, steady letters that were nothing like hesitant. "She is everything they say she is," Sella Bryn said. "And then some." "Yes," Luke said, "she is." Corvin Rath cornered Luke near the settlement's water trough while the animals were being watered and the drivers were resting before the return journey. The corning was done with enough casual positioning to look accidental, which meant it was not. "Mercer," Rath said. "Rath," Luke said. "You and Darkwolf," Rath said. He had dropped the easy smile. "Is that?" He made a gesture that encompassed a lot of ground economically. "Established. We have a contract," Luke said. "I am asking about more than the contract." Luke looked at him. "I know what you're asking." Rath was quiet for a moment. He was not, Luke thought, a bad man. He was an ambitious man, and there was a difference, and he had ridden 3 days over Mountain Road for a woman he wanted and found the ground occupied, and he was working through it in real time. "She is remarkable," Rath said, not with the appreciative audience quality he had worn yesterday, but with something closer to simple honesty. "She is," Luke agreed. "And you?" Rath stopped, looked at Luke with the assessing look of one professional evaluating another. "You are not what I would have expected," he said. "I get that," Luke said. Rath nodded once. He held out his hand. Luke shook it. Rath went to saddle his horse, and 2 hours later he headed back down the Thornback Road toward the lower valley without another word. And Luke watched him go and felt something complicated and simple at the same time, the feeling of something that could have been a problem declining to be one. The return journey was 2 days because they moved faster without the loaded wagons, just the drivers and the band and Luke. And on the first evening of the return, they camped beside a mountain stream that ran green and cold from the snowfields above. And the sky at sunset was extraordinary, red and gold, pulled thin across the peaks like something painted with intention. Dura sat with the notebook and the charcoal stub and the contract spread on a flat rock between them, and she read the problematic section aloud slowly, working through it word by word. And when she reached the word discretionary, she said it clearly and then said, "This gives them the power to withhold the bonus." "Yes," he said. "If I return the route notes they asked for as a supplemental delivery requirement in the clause below this," she said. "Do they still have that discretion?" He looked. She had found a clause he had glossed over on first reading. "No," he said slowly. "If you deliver the supplemental materials, the route notes, the bonus becomes mandatory." She nodded. "I will deliver the route notes when we arrive." He looked at her. "You have been preparing route notes." She reached into the saddlebag beside her and produced a rolled piece of paper. She opened it. The map on it was precise and detailed and labeled, not in the charcoal shorthand she had been using, but in written words, unsteady in places and clear in others, every canyon and waypoint and water source labeled in her own hand. "You taught me 12 letters in the first day," she said. "By the third day I had enough to start." He looked at the map for a long moment, and then he looked at her, and she was watching him steadily with those amber eyes. "Dura," he said. "It is rough," she said. "I know some of the spellings are wrong. It is the most impressive thing I have seen in 3 years," he said. She looked at him for a moment and then looked down at the map and smoothed a corner of it with her thumb, and the gesture was almost shy, which on her face was an extraordinary thing to see. "The route notes will be worth more if I can annotate them myself on future runs," she said. "I will need more lessons." "Yes," he said, "you will. Back at the monastery," she said. "And after?" "After," he said. She looked at him. "I am not going anywhere," he said, "if that is what you are asking." "I am asking," she said, "if you will stay." The directness of it, undressed of any pretense, it hit him the way the rock had hit his shoulder, sudden and total and real. "Yes," he said. She nodded once, the tactical nod. Then she held out the charcoal stub. "Teach me to write the word stay," she said. He took the charcoal. He wrote it on the rock. She wrote it below his version in her angular script, and then she wrote it again and then again, 4 times in a row, as if she were practicing it or maybe just marking it. "Stay, stay." They reached the monastery in the late afternoon of the second day of the return journey, coming down through the mountain gate with the drivers ahead, and the band around them, and the evening market still running in the arcades. The monastery's constable was at the gate with 2 guards and a boy running the evening gate log, and he nodded at Luke, and looked at Dura with the careful neutrality of a man who had revised his feelings about her upward, without quite getting there yet. The council registrar was not at the gate, but he was found quickly enough, an administrator named Huel who had the look of a man perpetually running 3 problems behind, and he met them in the eastern arcade to receive the delivery receipts from Ashgate. Dura produced the receipts, signed by Celebrin's clerk. She produced the route notes, rolled and tied and marked with her name. Huel looked at the route notes. He looked at Dura. "You prepared supplemental route documentation," he said. "As required by Section 4 of the contract," she said. "Clause 11, which triggers the mandatory bonus provision." Huel looked at Luke. Luke said nothing. Huel looked back at Dura. "I will need to verify the clause," he said carefully. "Here is the contract," she said, and produced her copy. She opened it to the correct section. She set her finger on Clause 11. "Take the time you need," she said. He took 4 minutes. He came back with a very specific expression. "The bonus will be processed by morning," he said. "Thank you," she said. Luke walked beside her out of the eastern arcade and into the open market where the evening torches were being lit, and the stalls were selling hot food, and the mountain wind had gone quiet in the way it did right before it decided to do something dramatic. He walked beside her, and he was aware of every inch of the distance between them, and then she closed it, her hand finding his without looking at him, her fingers wrapping around his with a grip that was sure and warm and not tentative at all. Her band walking ahead was very carefully looking at the food stalls. "You negotiated that yourself," he said. "I read the contract," she said. "Dura," she looked at him. "I am proud of you," he said. She stopped walking. He stopped with her. They were in the middle of the market, and people moved around them, and she looked at him with an expression that was unguarded, in a way he was learning was rare and precious. "No one has said that to me," she said. She stopped. "In a long time." "Then they were not paying attention," he said. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she reached up and put her free hand against his jaw, her thumb at the corner of his mouth, and looked at him with the firelight from the nearest torch making her eyes very amber and very warm. "You are ridiculous," she said softly. "You are a human bounty hunter with a hurt shoulder and a notebook full of letters, and you are—" She stopped. Her thumb moved. "You are very difficult to walk away from." "Good," he said. "Do not walk away." She kissed him in the middle of the market, and Tarek made a sound behind them that might have been approval filtered through significant dignity. And somewhere nearby, a merchant dropped a crate of something that clattered and rolled, and Luke could not have cared less about any of it. The following days settled into something that was new and specific and extremely good. Dura's band wintered at the monastery pass, as they always did. The monastery tolerated their presence because the alternative, having no one who knew the northern routes well enough to keep them safe, was worse than the discomfort of hosting a war band in their outer yards. The band had their usual flat above the northern gate. Luke had his usual room in the traveler's wing of the monastery inn, which was drafty and small and had a view of the stables, and within 4 days of their return, this arrangement had rearranged itself such that he spent very little time in his drafty room. The lessons continued every day. They moved from letters to words to sentences, and then to whole paragraphs, and Dura progressed with the same focused ferocity she brought to everything. She filled his notebook in 10 days, and he bought her own better quality, leather-backed, with proper ink and a fine quill, and she looked at it the way people looked at very good weapons, with appreciation for the craft of it. She read slowly and seriously, sounding through difficult words without embarrassment, asking the meaning of words she did not know, and then using them correctly in her next sentence. She had a particular taste for precise vocabulary. She would ask the exact difference between similar words, between adjacent and beside, between cautious and afraid, between loyal and obedient. And the differences mattered to her because she thought in precise terms and wanted her words to match. On the 12th day of lessons, she read him a paragraph from the trade law scroll she had borrowed from the monastery library, which was an event the librarian appeared to experience as transcendent, and at the end of it she set the scroll down and said, "I am going to read every contract I have ever signed." "You may not like what you find," he said. "I know," she said. "I need to know anyway." He helped her go through the ones she could locate. Some of what they found was innocuous, some was not. She sat with each discovery the way she sat with difficult terrain, assessing, not panicking, working out what could still be done. For the things that could not be undone, she put a mark in her notebook and set them aside in a category he privately labeled "things I will fix later," because he had already learned that she did not leave things unfinished. He got to know her band. Tarek was the first to thaw. It happened at the sparring yard, which the monastery's guard used in the mornings and Dura's band used in the afternoons. Luke was working through forms with his short sword. He was a competent fighter, not a brilliant one, but his technique was clean because sloppy technique had once cost him a run, and Tarek sat on the sparring yard fence watching him with arms crossed and an expression that was assessing. Then Tarek got down off the fence and showed him a correction to his guard position, without a word, just moving Luke's elbow 3 inches. Luke adjusted. They sparred for 40 minutes cautiously and then with less caution, and at the end of it Tarek looked at him with something that was not quite respect but was adjacent to it and said, "You hold on." "I know," Luke said. "She needs that," Tarek said, and went inside. He unpacked over the weeks the shape of her and she unpacked the shape of him, and neither of them did it the way people who were being careful did it. They did it the way 2 people do it when they are past the point of hedging. She had led her band for 7 years, and in those 7 years she had not had anyone who was simply hers. She told him one night, not a lieutenant, not a war council member, not someone who needed something from her authority. The isolation of command, she called it, in the precise vocabulary she was accumulating. It was a different kind of alone than his. His was the solitary man on the long road. Hers was the woman surrounded by people who depended on her, but the aloneness was the same. He told her about his father's debt and the years of running warrants alone, and she listened without pity, which was what he needed, and when he was done she said, "You have been running alone long enough." "Yes," he said. "So have I," she said. She had a particular habit of waking before dawn and sitting with the notebook and the good quill working through whatever reading or writing she had set herself for the week, and Luke started waking with her and making tea on the small iron brazier and sitting beside her in the pre-dawn dark. She did not say this was something she had needed, and he did not say he had not known he had it to give, but both of them understood both things. She was possessive in the quiet, certain way of someone who had decided a thing and acted on the decision. She kept a hand on him when they were in crowded spaces, not clutching, not performative, just a specific contact that was a continuous statement. When merchants at the market spoke to him with the casual assumption that she was not there or not worth addressing, she corrected this assumption efficiently, and once, when a council administrator spoke over her head to Luke as though she were an inconvenient piece of furniture that had wandered into the room, she said, in a voice that had the quiet of deep water and all the same implications, "I am in this conversation," and the administrator did not make the mistake again. He was protective in his own register, which was quieter than hers and worked from a different angle. When she was in negotiations, he let her lead and stayed positioned where he could see both the room and the exit, and she had told him she noticed, and he had said it was just professional habit, and she had told him it was not just professional habit, and they had both been correct. It was a Tuesday in late autumn, 6 weeks after the Ashgate run, when the trouble in the main hall happened. The main hall of the monastery was a large stone room used for market disputes, council hearings, and the evening communal meal that travelers and residents shared under the monastery's hospitality rule. It was always full and always loud, and always had the particular atmosphere of a room where many different people with many different interests were pretending to be comfortable together. Dura went to the main hall that Tuesday evening because there was a dispute resolution hearing that concerned one of her band, a territorial complaint by a valley merchant who claimed her people had interfered with a supply convoy on the lower road. The claim was false, and she knew it, and she was there to say so in front of the council arbitrator. Luke was there because he had come to every hearing she attended since the reading lesson in the first week of their return, when she had asked him to read the posted hearing notice aloud and then said, "Come with me. 2 sets of ears are better than 1. The hall was full. The merchant, a barrel-chested man named Goran with a face like a fist, and 2 large assistants flanking him, presented his complaint with a practiced grievance that had clearly been rehearsed. The council arbitrator, a tired-looking woman who had seen enough disputes to be tired, listened with the expression of someone counting the minutes. Dura presented her counter-evidence efficiently, naming dates and witnesses and root records, and Luke sat beside her at the petitioner's table and followed along on the notebook where she had written her points out the night before, whole sentences, clean and grammatical, which had taken her the better part of 3 hours and which she had refused help with, though she had asked him twice to confirm spellings. Goran, losing the evidential argument, shifted tactics. He turned from the arbitrator toward the hall and said, loud enough for the room, "The issue is not this specific date. The issue is that this raider sits in our market hall as though she has a right to it. The northern pass belongs to the monastery. The tolls she's collected for 3 years are stolen from our commerce. Why are we hearing her evidence as though she is a lawful person and not a criminal?" The hall went quiet in the particular way of a room deciding what to settle into. Dura sat very still. It was not the stillness of being diminished. It was the stillness of controlled power. "I am a co-commissioner of record with this council," she said evenly. "My standing in this hall is documented. Would you like me to read you the relevant section?" "Orcs do not read documents," Goran started. "This one does," she said. She opened the notebook. She read the relevant clause of the commission contract aloud, clearly, at a measured pace, every word correct. Goran's large assistant, the right-hand one, a lean man with a shaved head and a knife on his belt, and the eyes of someone who had made a decision somewhere back up the conversation, and had been waiting for the room to reach his level, pushed back from the bench and stood. He had the knife out before Luke had processed the motion fully, and it was moving for Dura's shoulder, the angle of it a thing that could have opened her from shoulder to spine if it landed. Luke was on his feet. He got between Dura and the knife, the same way he had gotten between her and the rock in the 4th canyon, not with time to think about it, just with the fact of his body moving to where her body needed not to be alone. The blade caught him across the left forearm instead of Dura's shoulder, a deep cut that immediately announced itself in terms he found difficult to ignore. And then Tarek, who had been standing against the wall at the back of the hall, as he always was at hearings, crossed 12 feet of crowded stone floor in 3 seconds and took the man off his feet entirely. Pinning both wrists to the floor with his knees and looking up at the hall with an expression that invited anyone to continue being part of this problem. No one continued. The hall was frozen. Luke was pressed against Dura's side, blood running freely from his forearm, his right hand gripping the edge of the petition table. The arbitrator was on her feet. Goran had gone the color of old chalk. Dura turned to Luke. She took his forearm in both hands and looked at the cut with the focused assessment she gave to everything. "Sit," she said. "I'm fine," he said. "Luke," she said in the voice she had used exactly once before in the canyon when she had said his name like it was a word she had been carrying a long time. "Sit." He sat. She pulled a cloth from inside her fitted bodice, always prepared, always practical, and bound it tight around his forearm with the precise efficiency of someone who had dealt with field wounds before, which she had many times, though he had noticed she dealt with his differently than she dealt with her own or her band's. There was something in the way her hands moved that was both clinical and very careful, and she did not look away from his arm until the bleeding had slowed. "This needs stitching," she said. "After the hearing," he said, she looked at him. "The clause needs to be entered into the record," he said. "You were in the middle of reading it." She looked at him for another beat, and then she turned back to the table and picked up the notebook, and finished reading the clause into the record with her hands completely steady and her voice completely level. And the arbitrator, who had been watching her with a different expression than the one she had walked in with, entered it without comment. The lean man with the shaved head was in the monastery constable's custody within the hour. Goran left without filing any further complaints. Tarek straightened his coat and returned to his wall. Dura stitched Luke's arm herself, in the small room above the stable that had become their shared space by natural accumulation over 6 weeks. His saddle bags on one side, her good quill and ink on the table, the leather-backed notebook beside it, 2 cups for tea on the iron brazier. She had a small kit for field medicine, organized with the same precision as everything she owned, and she worked with the clean, economical movement of someone for whom this was not new. He sat on the edge of the narrow bed and held his arm still and watched her face, which was focused and set and had a line between her brows that was not clinical. "You did it again," she said. "You were going to take that in the shoulder," he said. "I was going to move," she said. "Maybe." "I was going to move," she said again more firmly, and he thought she might have been right, that she might have had the speed for it, but he also thought he had not been willing to find out. "The arm is fine," he said. "It needed 8 stitches," she said. "It is fine." She tied off the last stitch. She did not move away immediately. She stayed with her hands wrapped around his forearm, not applying pressure now, just there, and she looked at him with the unguarded expression she had given him in the market that first evening, the one that was not softness exactly but was the architecture of it. "You are going to keep doing this," she said, not a question. "Getting between you and knives," he said. "Yes, probably," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Among my people, when a warrior claims another, when she says this person is mine and I am theirs and I will cover their body with my own, there is a marking, a declaration." She paused. "It is not done lightly. It is done once." He looked at her. His heart was doing something that was not quite calm. "Is that what you are telling me?" he said. "I am telling you," she said carefully, "that I have been running this calculation since the morning in the canyon, and the calculation keeps coming out the same." "Tell me the calculation," he said. She looked at him squarely in the way she did everything. "I could go anywhere," she said. "I have the pass. I have the band. I have enough of a name that the council wants my signature on documents, and the merchants pay their tolls without argument. I do not need anything from you." She paused. "But I want you." I want to wake before dawn and have tea across from someone who is reading his notes and not demanding anything from me but my company. I want someone who throws himself between me and rocks not because I am powerful but because I matter to him. I want, she stopped. Her jaw tightened and then released. I want to not be alone in the way that I have been alone, she said. And I have not been alone in that way since the first night you sat across the fire from me and taught me my name. He put his free hand against her jaw the way she had put hers against his. Her skin was warm. Dura, he said. Yes, she said. Show me the marking, he said. Tell me what it means. I want to know what I am agreeing to. She took a breath. It is a declaration spoken aloud before witnesses, and then a mark made here. She touched the inside of her own wrist where the pulse was strong so that the claim is visible. In my tradition, the claiming goes both ways. I mark you and you mark me. And it binds us. Yes, she said, it does. Then I agree to it, he said, all of it. She looked at him for a long moment, reading him the way she read the contracts now carefully, completely, not missing anything. You understand what you are agreeing to, she said. It was not a question, but he answered it. I am agreeing that you are mine and I am yours, he said. That I will cover your body with my own and you will do the same. That we are not alone anymore. He looked at her. I understood those terms before you said them. She let out a breath that was very nearly the kind of breath that has something behind it. Tomorrow, she said, I will have Tarak as witness and you will choose yours. The headwoman Bryn is in the market today, he said. She came down from Ashgate to deliver the second payment. She said she wanted to meet us both again. Something moved through Dura's face that was very warm. Sella Bryn, she said. If you want her, he said. I want her, she said. She set down the medical kit. She did not move away from him, and he did not move away from her, and the room was warm from the brazier, and outside the mountain wind had picked up and was pulling at the shutters, and he thought about 3 years ago and 3 seconds of eye contact, and the thing he had carried since, and he thought that the carrying of it had been worth exactly this. She kissed him the way she did everything completely, without reservation, with the full weight of a decision that had been made and would not be unmade. He pulled her close with his good arm and she came willingly, which was its own particular wonder, the willingness of a woman who feared nothing choosing closeness, and the room was warm and the night was long and there was nowhere else in the world he wanted to be. The mountain wind was still going when they woke before dawn. She was already sitting with the notebook and the good quill. He made tea. She looked up at him when he set her cup beside the notebook. The line of morning gray was just beginning at the shutters. 8 letters left, she said, that I have not practiced enough. Q and X are the hard ones, he said. They do not show up often. X shows up in the Valley Treaty maps, she said, as a marker for boundary points. Does it? I found 3 of them last week, she said, and pulled a folded paper from beneath the notebook. It was a copy of a 5-year-old boundary treaty, covered in her marginal notes questions, definitions, a list of what she thought each clause meant, and a question mark beside the ones she was not sure of. He sat beside her, and they went through it while the tea cooled, and the morning light grew and outside the monastery began its slow daily waking, the bells and the boots and the market stalls unlocking. He explained the boundary clauses, and she asked 3 questions that were better than the questions he would have asked on first read, and she wrote the answers in the margins in her precise angular script, and at the end of it she folded the paper and sat with it in her hands for a moment. There is a clause in here that voids the water rights my clan lost 20 years ago, she said, if it is interpreted correctly. He looked at her. It was superseded by the Valley Magistrate's consolidation order in the 4th year after signing, she said. But the consolidation order itself has a procedural flaw I would like a legal mind to look at. I know a solicitor in the lower valley, he said slowly. He works mostly on trade disputes, but he knows his procedure. She looked at him. Would he take a case? He would take my recommendation, Luke said, and he would find the case interesting. She looked at him for a long moment. He thought about what it meant 20 years of a clan's dispossession, a water rights question, a procedural flaw in a document that no one in her clan had been able to read when they signed it. He thought about the 15-year-old watching the chief sign a treaty, thinking it was strength, learning 3 years later what had actually been written. "We write to him today," Luke said. She nodded once. She did not say thank you. She did not need to. She picked up the quill and looked at him. "What is his name?" she said. "Felsoren," he said. Fell. She wrote it carefully. Soren. "Good," he said. She held the quill still and looked at what she had written. Then she looked at him, and in the growing morning light her amber eyes were very clear. "Luke," she said. "Yes." "I'm going to spend a long time being grateful that you could read," she said, "and that you were willing to teach me." "You are going to spend a long time being a better reader than me," he said. "You already ask better questions about vocabulary." The corner of her mouth moved. "That is true," she said. The morning arrived fully then, gray and cold and clean, and the monastery market woke below them with its bells and its vendors and its ordinary complicated life. Sella Bryn would be in the eastern arcade by mid-morning. Tarak would be at the sparring yard until the second bell. The solicitor's letter would be written and sealed and sent with the afternoon courier. And at noon, in the open yard above the northern gate, where the mountain air came clear and cold off the high peaks, and the valley spread away to the south in its blue and white distances, Luke Mercer and Dura Darkwolf stood before Tarak and Sella Bryn and the 8 members of the band, and said the words out loud in the mountain light. He had learned the declaration from her the night before. It was short and blunt and entirely characteristic of the tradition it came from, and he said his part of it in a clear voice that did not shake. She said hers looking at him, not at the witnesses, in the amber-eyed direct way she had of making you feel like the only landmark in a very wide landscape. Tarak produced the small bone-handled blade that was traditional for the marking, and he was very solemn about it, and also, around his eyes, somewhere quite close to moved. Sella Bryn was crying openly and not apologizing for it. The mark went on the inside of the wrist where the pulse ran strong. It was not deep, barely more than a graze and a smear of ink from the ritual press. The mark itself was a specific shape, 2 lines crossing, that Dura's tradition used for union, and she made his mark herself with a steady hand, and then he held the blade for hers, his hands careful, and she did not flinch. She looked at her marked wrist and then at his. "Now," she said. "Now," he agreed. She stepped forward and kissed him in the mountain wind in front of everyone who mattered, and Tarak made the sound again that was clearly approval despite his best efforts to contain it. And Sella Bryn said something warm and probably inappropriate, and the mountain air smelled of pine and cold iron and coming snow, and it was the same air that had been blowing through this pass for 1,000 years and would blow for 1,000 more, and it moved through them both and kept moving. The way the world does when 2 people have finally stopped running from each other and settled into the same place. Below them the market ran its ordinary life. The mules brayed. A merchant argued about wool prices. A constable walked the arcade with his morning list. Up the north road, the pass waited with its canyons and its cold and its absolute indifference to human or orc concerns. The road that she had held for 7 years and would hold differently now, with different documents and different knowledge, and a solicitor's letter on its way to the lower valley about 20-year-old water rights. On the small table in the room above the stable, the leather-backed notebook lay open to a page of her writing full sentences, grammatical, precise, with 8 letters still to master, and a treaty to contest, and every contract she had ever signed waiting to give up its secrets to the woman who had decided she was going to read every last one of them. Dura Darkwolf, the feared raider of the northern pass, stood in the mountain light with her claimed man's hand in hers and her wrist marked in her band around her, and she was every bit as fierce and magnificent and certain as she had always been, and she was also, at last, not carrying any of it alone. Luke Mercer, bounty hunter, adequate swordsman, very willing teacher of the alphabet, stood beside her with an 8-stitch arm and a smear of ritual ink on his wrist, and the full, grounded, unhurried knowledge that he had been found by exactly the right person. Celebrin wiped her eyes and said it was the wind. Tarek said nothing at all, which was his fullest form of eloquence. The mountain held them in its stone-cold light, and the pass stretched north toward whatever came next, and they were ready for it.